Hey everyone! ChatGPT Taylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we will be continuing the What If series, where I go over some hypothetical scenarios from Disventure Camp that could have taken place if one critical event was changed. Last time, we took a look at what would have happened if Lake was saved with an immunity totem in episode 8 of season 2. Today's video will look at something different. If there are any specific what if scenarios that you would like to see me play out in the future, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. And with that, let's get started. Before I begin, make sure to like and subscribe if this video is to your liking, and make sure to comment down below if there's anything that you would like to see going forward. Alright, the topic for this episode isn't something that I've seen mentioned before, so hopefully it's a novel topic. The topic is: what if Maggy won rock paper scissors in episode 4 of season 2? As a bit of refresher, let's look back at that episode. In episode 4, Yul was switched on to the orange team by Rhea, leaving him without his original alliance. To save himself, Yul tricked Aiden into voting for James, allowing him and James to force a 2-2-2-1 tie between himself and Maggy. To break the tie, they played a round of rock paper scissors, which Yul won, eliminating Maggy from the game. We know what happened next. Yul was medically evacuated in the next episode. Aiden and James worked together to make it to the finale, and James went on to win the season. But what happens if Maggy wins rock paper scissors? Let's find out. To put it simply, if Maggy wins rock paper scissors, then Yul is eliminated instead. He probably leaves in a fit of rage, humiliated that his plan failed. But since he's eliminated here, he doesn't end up getting poisoned by James in the next episode. So if you ask me, I think it's better for him to leave this way. At least he's not leaving in an ambulance this time. Unless Maggy still punches him and gives him a concussion, of course. Before we get to the elimination, I want to talk about how Maggy's presence affects other parts of the game. First of all, with Maggy being here, does Lake get closer with Aiden? I'm not sure that she does. I might be wrong, but in my opinion, I feel like Lake opened up to Aiden in canon because she didn't feel like she had anyone else to talk to. Maggy was voted out, Rosa was on the other team, Yul was a menace, and James voted out her ally. So Aiden would be the only person that she could realistically open up to. But if Maggy is still here, I think Lake opens up to Maggy instead, and I think Maggy would give Lake advice similar to what Aiden gave her in canon. One more thing. Even though Maggy is here instead of Yul, I'm going to assume that Rosa still finds the immunity totem. I just don't think that Maggy has shown any indication that she would be good at finding the totem. Now for the challenge. Because Yul wasn't the main reason why the orange team lost in canon, I think the orange team still loses. And if this happens, then I just don't see how James survives this ceremony. Since Yul is gone, James can't use him as a shield to keep votes off of himself. Yul's absence also means that James can poison Yul to get him medically evacuated in place of an elimination. And James has gone on record to say that poisoning anyone who isn't Yul is way too much, so that's not an option for him either. Therefore, I see James voting for Maggy, hoping that Aiden would join him to force a tie. Unfortunately, I think Maggy, Lake, and Aiden stick together to vote out James by a vote of 3-1. Since James won the season in canon, his elimination means that no matter what happens from this point on, we will have a new winner of this season. That's huge. This episode has no elimination, so I'll just go over some aspects that I think will change. For the challenge, the campers are split up into pairs. I still think that Ali and Tess stick together, and all of their conversations from the canon episode still take place. The same is true for Rhea and Rosa. But for Aiden, since James is no longer in the competition, he can't be Aiden's partner. My first thought was, well, since Maggy is here instead of James, let's have Maggy be Aiden's partner. But then I realized that there's not much we can do with that pairing, since they never had any conversations in canon. And from a story writing perspective, I don't think we can build much off of this pairing. So instead, I'm going to pair up Aiden and Hunter, leaving Maggy and Lake as the final pairing. I'll go over the new events that these pairings experienced during this episode. For Aiden and Hunter, I think they spend some time getting to know each other. I don't think they end up cuddling, but since Hunter is a bit of a strategist, I can see him trying to pull Aiden into his alliance with Ali and Tess. Now that Yul is gone, Hunter doesn't have as many numbers as he once had. So, it would make sense for him to try and pull someone else to his side. And because Lake confided in Maggy instead of Aiden in this universe, Aiden doesn't have as much loyalty to Lake as he did in canon. So I can see him taking Hunter's words to heart. As for Lake and Maggy, I think they spend the first part of the challenge trying to survive. But just like in canon, Crystal arrives to take Lake away, abandoning Maggy in the process. But what happens to Maggy? I think she spends a few minutes scared, but then she runs into Kai in the forest, just like Oliver did to her and Kai in canon. I think Kai would allow her to stay with him for the night, and I think Kai takes this opportunity to give Maggy some advice for the future. Probably something that would help Maggy realize that the people left in the game care about her and that she should be able to be friends with them. Maybe he says something profound like,
"The lonely toad is only lonely until they rib it with the frogs."
I don't know. But that sounds right. Either way, the episode ends the same. Lake stays in the competition, vows to be her own person, and all the remaining campers stay in the competition. This time, we'll start at the challenge. Part 1 of the challenge splits the remaining campers into 2 groups for a dodgeball game. Since Maggy is here instead of James, we'll have Maggy take James's spot in Group A with Rhea, Hunter, and Lake. And in this situation, I still think that this group wins Part 1 of the challenge. In canon, James didn't knock out anyone on the other team, so even if Maggy falls off or can't knock out anyone on the other team, Group A should still win this part of the challenge. Now for Part 2. Since James is gone, we will have Maggy fighting Rhea, while Lake fights Hunter. This is where it gets a little difficult. Because in canon, James and Rhea both lost because James hopped onto Rhea's pedestal, which caused it to fall over, thereby sending Lake and Hunter to the final round. But in this situation, I don't think Maggy would jump over to Rhea's pedestal. In fact, considering Maggy's size and the instability of the pedestals, I think Maggy falls before she has a chance to actually fight. But what happens if Maggy falls? Considering Maggy's height and the closeness of the pedestals to each other, if Maggy falls, she probably falls into someone. If she falls forward, she falls into Rhea, sending Lake and Hunter to the final round. If she falls backward, she falls into Hunter, sending Lake and Rhea into the final round. If Maggy falls sideways, then Rhea will compete in the finals against whoever wins the duel between Lake and Hunter. And I'm inclined to think that Lake wins that one considering her aggression in that round. If Lake and Hunter are in the final round, we know that Hunter wins, since that's what happened canonically. But if Lake and Rhea are in the final round, I think Lake probably wins, because Lake was pretty close to winning in canon. Also, the last part of the final round requires accuracy, and we know that Rhea isn't the most accurate camper in the game. So, the winner of this challenge depends entirely on which direction Maggy falls. I'll be honest, I have no idea how to answer this question. I tried looking up whether or not someone is more likely to fall forward, backward, or sideways, and the only information I could find pertained to elderly individuals, which Maggy is not. So to determine who wins immunity, I'm going to go with the most probable scenario. Since the 3 options are for Maggy to fall forward, backward, and sideways, and because 2 of those 3 scenarios result in Lake winning immunity, I'll say that Lake wins this challenge. Although to be honest, I don't think it matters much in the long run. Who gets voted out? Well, I think the remaining campers split into 2 groups. The trio of Maggy, Lake, and Rosa, as well as the trio of Hunter, Ali, and Tess. I think Maggy, Lake, and Rosa target Hunter for being the strongest of the trio, and I think Hunter, Ali, and Tess target Maggy for being seen as a physical threat. This leaves Rhea and Aiden as the swing votes. And honestly, I think they vote Maggy out. In this universe, Aiden isn't close with Lake, so he has no real attachment to her alliance. So if Hunter continues to offer Aiden a chance to join his alliance with Ali and Tess, I think Aiden will take that offer. As for Rhea, she would feel worried that she would be the 4th wheel if she sided with Rosa, Lake, and Maggy. I know that in canon, Rosa assured Rhea that she could join her and Lake in an alliance. However, having a 4th person in the mix makes the situation more complicated for Rhea. We can assume that Rhea thinks that the finale will be a final 2, based on episode 11 where Rhea was shocked that the finale would be a final 3. In the canon universe, I can imagine a scenario where Rhea would be okay with going to the final 3 with Lake and Rosa, knowing that she would be the odd one out. This would be because all she has to do is win one challenge to make it to the final 2, which was likely since neither Rosa nor Lake were major challenge threats when Rosa proposed the deal. But with Maggy in the picture, going to the final 4 with Maggy, Lake, and Rosa is not good for Rhea because now she has to win 2 challenges to get to the final 2. And with Maggy's size, there's a reason for Rhea to suspect that Maggy could be tough to beat down the road. Therefore, I have Rhea joining Aiden and the Poly Trio to vote out Maggy by a vote of 5-3. It's a sad elimination, but I think Maggy leaves as a more confident person. And hey, she made it 3 episodes further than in canon, so that's good I guess. This episode has the same cast as in canon except instead of James being here, it's Tess. However, we can't just assume that Tess replaces James in all of his scenes because Aiden and Tess never had any interactions during the show. So we'll have to break down where everyone goes during the challenge. But before we do that, there's one change that I want to address. Since Rhea just betrayed Lake and Rosa, I assume that they would want to keep their distance from Rhea for a little while. But keep in mind that in canon, this is the episode where Rosa showed her immunity totem to Lake and Rhea. But if Lake and Rosa are staying away from Rhea right now, then Rhea won't be there to see Rosa's totem. So for the time being, Lake will be the only person, other than Rosa, that knows about Rosa's totem. Now let's get to the challenge. I'll be honest, when I was writing the script for this video, I wrote out a full explanation about how the order of the killings changes because James isn't here. This explanation was about a page and a half long. Then I realized that the final outcome doesn't change. Ali is still killed in the shower. Hunter is knocked out by Nina when he goes to the producer's tent. The remaining 5 campers barricade themselves in a cabin until Carol busts through the door. Rhea is killed after helping everyone else through the window. Tess is killed for being the closest to the killer when everyone tries to use the bus to escape. Rosa is killed when she stays behind to fight the serial killer. Aiden is tackled and killed when him and Lake are running to Crystal's helicopter, and Lake is pulled off of the boat and killed. The only way that Carol doesn't win is if Lake saves Aiden when Carol tries to kill him in the forest, allowing the two of them to work together to overpower Carol. However, due to Aiden's perceived lack of physical strength, I doubt this happens, so Carol still earns a spot back in the game. But now that Carol wins immunity, she has to pick 2 other campers to win immunity. In canon, Nina told Carol to save Hunter and Ali because they were in the minority against the main alliance of 5. So in this situation, I think Nina tells Carol to save Lake and Rosa, since the 2 of them are in the minority against the main alliance of 5. Carol complies, meaning that Lake and Rosa also win immunity. But who gets voted out? I assume that Hunter, Ali, and Tess stick together, and they probably target Rhea, since Hunter brought Aiden into their alliance. And even though Rhea betrayed Rosa and Lake, I think they would see the alliance of Hunter, Ali, and Tess being more of a threat, due to their potential numerical advantage. I think they target Hunter, seeing him as the biggest threat in that alliance. Rhea probably joins them out of self-preservation. They are probably able to get Carol to vote with them since she gave them immunity. And that leaves Aiden as the swing vote. I'm not 100% sure on who Aiden votes here, but I'm inclined to think that Aiden actually throws away his vote by voting for either Tess or Ali. Let's say he votes for Tess since he might think that he'll get less backlash from doing that due to Tess's passive demeanor. In canon, Aiden voted for Rhea since he didn't want to vote for Lake or James, who were the other 2 options. Therefore, it's not impossible for Aiden to throw his vote. And if he does, Hunter is voted out by a vote of 4 to 3 to 1. That's a big drop for him. From 4th place in canon to 8th place in this universe. What a shame. Episode 9 has the same cast as in canon except instead of James and Hunter being here, it's Tess and Lake. There are some things that are important to note. First of all, I'm going to assume that Carol still wants Aiden out, considering how she still held a grudge against him in canon. Secondly, Carol still talks to Rhea and convinces her to help her target Aiden. Even though Rhea probably doesn't want Aiden out, I think Carol would be able to manipulate her into thinking that's best for her game, based on their mutual traits. And finally, with Hunter out, I think Ali and Tess become closer as a pairing, and Ali probably steps up as the strategist in their alliance. Now let's move on to the challenge. I don't think Tess or Lake would be able to put a lot of personality into her sled, so I still think that Rosa Maria wins part 1 of the challenge, since that's what happened in canon. For part 2 of the challenge, it's still run in pairs. I think Carol and Rhea still pair up together, and Rosa Maria still gets to compete on her own since she won part 1. Since Hunter isn't here to pair up with Ali, I think it's logical that Tess pairs up with Ali instead, due to their closeness to each other. This leaves Lake to pair up with Aiden. Let's look at the conversations that happen when they go up the mountain. Nothing should change with Carol and Rhea's conversation. I still think that Carol instills some paranoia into Rhea, helping her realize that she needs to do whatever she can to win the game. Tess and Ali probably reaffirm their loyalty to each other and think about the moves that they can make to survive. As for Aiden and Lake, I think Lake may try to get Aiden on her side, and I think he's willing to listen. Since Hunter is gone and Aiden voted for Tess at the last ceremony, I think Aiden wouldn't be inclined to vote with Ali and Tess anymore, especially if he thinks that Carol trusts him and would still want to vote out Tess and Ali. But who wins part 2 of the challenge? I think Ali would have an easier time pulling Tess up the mountain since Tess probably weighs less than Hunter. But this doesn't change the fact that Rosa Maria doesn't have to carry anyone, so I think it's likely that Rosa still wins part 2 of the challenge. Since Rosa's only solid ally is Lake, I think Rosa picks Lake to be her partner, leaving Oliver to become Aiden's partner in order to balance out the teams. But who wins immunity? Assuming that Rosa is still using her sled, I assume that the sled will break and cause Rosa and Lake to crash, just like Rosa and Rhea did in canon. With Tess and Ali, I'm convinced that they crash before getting to the finish line. If Ali is still in control of the directions, then Ali probably gets hit off the sled, freaking out Tess and causing her to crash. And if Ali is blindfolded instead of Tess, it's possible that Tessa's quiet voice makes it harder for Ali to hear her instructions, causing them to crash. As for Carol and Rhea, since James isn't here to turn Aiden against Carol, and since Lake doesn't have any evidence that Carol wants to betray Aiden, Aiden probably doesn't sabotage Carol like he did in canon. Therefore, assuming that Carol and Rhea travel faster than Aiden and Oliver, which I assume they do considering how Carol was able to catch up to Aiden and James in canon, then not only do Carol and Rhea win immunity, but since Carol doesn't crash like she did in canon, this also prevents Carol from being medically evacuated, which will impact the elimination. With Carol and Rhea immune, who gets voted out? I think Rosa Maria and Lake continue targeting the fractured showmans by voting for Tess, hoping that Carol and Rhea would vote with them once again. However, I think Carol decides that now is the time to take her shot at Aiden and campaigns for his elimination. I think Carol goes to Tess and Ali and convinces them that Aiden was the one who threw the rogue vote at Tess during the last ceremony. Whether she believes it or not, I think Tess and Ali would see it as an opportunity for self-preservation and join Carol in voting for Aiden. I also think Rhea votes for Aiden due to Rhea's loyalty to Carol. In this situation, Aiden probably sides with Lake and Rosa Maria by voting for Tess since that's what he did at the last ceremony. But in the end, the majority of votes are cast against Aiden, and I don't think Rosa Maria is close enough with Aiden to justify using her totem to save him, causing Aiden to be voted out 4-3. Sorry Aiden. From 3rd place to 7th place. Tough break. But remember, episode 10 only featured 5 campers, and we still have 6 campers remaining since no one was medically evacuated. So what happens? As I stated in the last What If video, I think the most realistic option is that Crystal announces that the remaining campers will vote for a second time, resulting in one more camper being voted out. The reason why I see this as the most realistic option is because we already know that this is an option, since that's what Crystal did back in episode 3 with Kai and Connor's eliminations. But where do the votes fall? I think Carol continues her theme of getting revenge by targeting Rosa Maria and Lake, since they voted her out in episode 2. Since Lake did well in the challenges from episodes 7 and 8, and since Carol agreed to vote for Lake in the canon episode 8, I think Carol targets Lake at this ceremony. Rhea does the same out of loyalty to Carol, and I think Tess and Ali vote with them out of self-preservation, knowing that Lake voted for Tess at the last ceremony. I also think that Rosa Maria and Lake vote against Tess, just like they did at the last ceremony. So with this vote count, Lake receives the majority of the votes. But there's one hiccup. Does Rosa Maria use her totem to save Lake? In order for this to happen, Rosa Maria needs to feel that she doesn't have the votes to keep Lake safe, and she also needs to feel like the others would target Lake over herself. And honestly, I think both of these things occur. Since Carol, Rhea, Ali, and Tess voted together at the last ceremony, it would make sense to expect the 4 of them to vote with each other again. And when looking at who they would target, Rosa would probably see Lake's 2 previously great challenge performances and expect them to target her. Would Rosa be worried for herself? Yeah, probably. But considering how close Rosa and Lake are, especially since they are each other's only true allies left in the game, I think Rosa would be more than willing to save Lake with her totem. And if this happens, the 4 votes against Lake are cancelled out, resulting in Tessa's elimination with only 2 votes. Truly a blindside, but at least she lasted 2 episodes longer than in canon. Before analyzing the challenge, I just want to lay out the dynamics between the campers so we're aware of what they're thinking before the challenge. At this point, I think it's safe to expect Lake and Rosa Maria to stick together, and for Carol and Rhea to stick together. This leaves Ali as the one in the middle. I would expect Ali to be campaigned to by both duos, leaving her in an uncertain position heading into the immunity challenge. For the immunity challenge, I would expect the 2 duos to target each other. Due to Rhea's challenge performance in the canon timeline, Rosa Maria's passive nature in the canon challenge, and Lake's lack of accuracy in the finale of season 2, I don't think any of the 3 of them would excel at this challenge. However, Carol was able to hit James twice from a very long distance, so I'm inclined to think that Carol and Rhea would be able to take out Lake and Rosa Maria first, although I expect Lake and Rosa Maria to get at least 1 hit on both Rhea and Carol, considering that Carol's aggression might make her want to charge blindly towards Lake and Rosa Maria to take them out, without concern for losing her own balloons. With Carol and Rhea drained of their ammunition and down by 1 balloon apiece, I'm inclined to think that Ali and her potential experience with first-person shooters allows her to take out Rhea before Carol sees her and goes after her, leading to a Carol versus Ali showdown. But who wins? In the end, I think this challenge comes down to strategy. In canon, Hunter may have had good accuracy, but he won because he was able to hide, wait for his opponents to enter an open space, and then attack them. Because Ali is a gamer, I suspect that she's probably employed similar strategies during gameplay sessions. And because Carol tends to have an aggression-focused mindset, it's likely that she would probably go all offense, leaving herself open for Ali to catch her off guard and eliminate her, earning Ali immunity. But who gets voted out? As I stated earlier, the 2 duos likely stick together and vote against each other. Lake and Rosa Maria likely vote for Carol due to her aggression and attitude, while Carol and Rhea likely vote for Lake since that's what they did at the last ceremony. This leaves Ali with the deciding vote. And after a bit of thought, I think Ali joins Carol and Rhea in voting for Lake, mostly because Lake voted both Hunter and Tess out of the game. Lake is also a decent physical threat, considering she won the Episode 7 Immunity Challenge and was the last one standing in the Serial Killer Challenge. So if Ali is thinking strategically, which we know she can do thanks to Disventure Camp All-Stars, it makes sense for her to get rid of Lake as it gives her a better chance of winning the next challenge. But before we move on, there is one more thing that I want to cover about this episode. In canon, Rhea made it seem like Rosa stole James's phone and her own perfume, putting a target on Rosa's back that got her voted out. Does Rhea do the same thing in this scenario? I'm inclined to think that she doesn't. In canon, it seems like the true turning point for Rhea that prompted her to frame Rosa was seeing Aiden sabotage Carol, causing her to get medically evacuated. Since that doesn't happen in this timeline, I'm not convinced that Rhea goes through with a plan to frame Rosa. I will say that I can imagine a scenario where this does happen, using Ali's Nintendo Switch instead of James's phone. However, I'm not convinced that it does happen, for the reason I explained earlier. Therefore, Lake is still voted out by a vote of 3-2. Sorry Lake, but I guess 5th is better than 8th, right? Again, let's look at everyone's plans going into the challenge. I would expect Carol, Rhea, and Ali to try and stick together to take out Rosa Maria, since they worked together at the previous ceremony. I'm sure that Rosa Maria would try and get Ali to vote with her, noting Carol and Rhea's closeness. Ali would certainly consider Rosa Maria's words, although she would need to consider whether it's better to side with Rosa and potentially force a tie or side with the last clear duo in the game. Now for the challenge. The first part of the challenge is basically running to a cliff and jumping off. Therefore, the results of this challenge should be dependent on who the fastest runner is and whether or not they're willing to jump off a high cliff. Based on the first episode where they had to run from the bus to the camp, the order in which the remaining 4 campers arrived was Ali in first, Rosa in second, Rhea in third, and Carol in last. So, I think it's safe to assume that this is the order in which they arrive at the cliffs in this challenge. Thanks to episode 5 of Disventure Camp All-Stars, we now know that Ali has a problem with jumping off cliffs, but it's also not impossible for her to do it, since she ended up doing it with some encouragement from Ashley. In this scenario, I can imagine Ali getting to the cliffs first, climbing to the highest cliff, and freaking out until Rosa Maria arrives to console her and give her confidence. This consolation would probably take some time, allowing Rhea to swoop in and jump off the highest cliff first. This forces Ali to go down to the second cliff, and I think she would jump off it, using the lessened height and Rosa Maria's encouragement as a source of motivation. This allows Rosa Maria to jump off the third cliff, leaving Carol with the lowest cliff. Part 2 of the challenge is basically a slingshotting challenge, so whoever has the best accuracy and shooting ability should win. As a side note, since Rosa placed third in part 1, but there was no third place in the canon timeline part 2 because James opted out of the challenge, let's assume that Rosa gets grapefruits as her ammunition, since those are larger than lemons and smaller than pineapples. Since Aiden, the original winner of this challenge, is out of the game, he can't win. So who wins instead? Even though Rhea has the largest ammunition, I don't think Rhea would win considering that she had the largest ammunition in the canon challenge, and she still didn't win there, so I don't see why she would win in this scenario. And for Rosa, even though she mentioned that she grew up in a neighborhood where people used weapons, there's nothing to suggest that she's used any kinds of weapons that shoot, so I'm going to rule her out as well. That leaves Carol, who showed her accuracy in the canon season 2 finale, and Ali, whose potential skill in first-person shooter video games would give her an advantage. In the end, even though Ali won the last shooting-based challenge in this timeline, it was her ability to hide and catch Carol off guard that won her the challenge, rather than her accuracy. And considering that in this challenge, it's based entirely on accuracy and not on hiding, I don't think that Ali would have as much success here as she did in the last challenge. Therefore, I think Carol ends up winning immunity since there's actual proof that Carol can hit a moving target thanks to the Season 2 finale. And who gets voted out? Well, I expect Rhea and Carol to stick together, and I think Carol's dominant personality would prompt her to make the final call on who to vote out. And I think Carol would want to target Rosa Maria. Carol might not have the best attitude, but she's shown that she will be loyal to the people that are loyal to her, and since Ali voted with her at the last 3 ceremonies, I think Carol would prefer to keep Ali around, even if Ali is a stronger competitor than Rosa Maria. I think Rhea would join Carol, considering her allegiance to her. Meanwhile, I think Rosa Maria would vote for Rhea, and beg Ali to force a tie with her. Ali would be in a tough spot as she would feel some form of loyalty to Rosa Maria for helping her during the challenge. However, if we're being consistent with the rest of this timeline, Ali has shown that she will act on self-preservation and make moves that give her the best chance of winning the game. And in this situation, the move that satisfies both requirements is to vote out Rosa Maria. Since the final four are aware that the finale will be a final three, Ali's optimal move would be to take out the biggest physical threat. And between Rhea and Rosa Maria is a stronger physical threat, primarily based on the sledding challenge. Yes, Rhea ended up winning that challenge, but she was mostly playing second fiddle to Carol on that one, while Rosa Maria had to win the first two parts of that challenge on her own. So, I think Rosa Maria ends up getting voted out by a vote of 3-1, narrowly missing out on the finale. Sorry, Rosa. Now we're at the finale. Before we get to the challenge, we need to figure out who each eliminated camper supports so we can figure out each finalist's helper for the challenge. For Rhea, I think her only supporter is Connor, since she and Connor were really close before Connor quit. For Carol, I think her only supporter is James. Even though James didn't seem to like Carol in the 2 episodes where they were together, Carol didn't directly cause James's elimination in this timeline, and James has always been a proponent of hate the game, not the player. Therefore, I think James would vote for the person who played the best strategic game, and that would be Carol, considering how she controlled the game from the moment she returned to the competition. Meanwhile, I think Ali gets the remaining 8 campers on her side. She obviously gets Tess and Hunter's support due to her bond with them. As for Yul, he was in an alliance with her, so he must like her to some degree. For Maggy, Lake, and Rosa Maria, I think they wouldn't like Carol's poor attitude, and they would probably hold some resentment towards Rhea for turning her back on them twice, leaving them with Ali as their only option. For Aiden, I knew that he wouldn't side with Carol since she orchestrated his elimination at the final 7 in this timeline. I ended up having him support Ali because even though both Ali and Rhea voted him out, I feel like him and Rhea didn't have many interactions in this timeline, and Aiden might feel some remorse for turning his back on Ali's alliance at the final 8 by voting for Tess and indirectly causing Hunter's elimination. As for Kai, I strongly considered having him support Rhea since she didn't vote him out in canon, while Ali did. However, since Kai is so close to Maggy, I think he wouldn't want to potentially upset her by supporting the camper that betrayed her, so I have him joining Maggy to support Ali instead. Based on this arrangement, Rhea picks Connor to help her in the challenge since he's the only one supporting her. And Carol picks James for the exact same reason. As for Ali, it's not an easy decision, but I think she picks Hunter to help her, considering her close bond with him as well as his physical capabilities. Now let's break down part 1 of the challenge. In canon, Rhea and Connor were able to complete this portion of the challenge pretty quickly, so it's reasonable to believe that they would be able to pull off a similar performance. However, in canon, Aiden completed this part of the challenge faster than Rhea, so we know that it's possible for someone to complete this part faster than Rhea and Connor. And honestly, I think it's possible that Carol and James finish this part of the challenge first. We know that James isn't afraid to travel fast on an ATV, and from what I've seen online, driving an ATV isn't too different from driving a snowmobile. Therefore, James would probably be willing to drive the snowmobile really fast. As for Carol, in the canon sledding challenge, she was able to maintain balance while standing on her sled. I know that it's probably easier to balance on a sled than skis, but it's the closest comparable that we have, and there's no evidence to suggest that Carol is terrible at balancing, as opposed to someone like James. Therefore, I'm inclined to think that Carol and James would finish this section before Rhea and Connor. And for Ali and Hunter, even though there's no evidence to suggest that Ali would be bad at balancing, there's no evidence to suggest that Hunter would be better at handling a snowmobile than Connor or James. Hunter did handle a boat in episode 1, but a boat and a snowmobile are 2 different vehicles. Hunter may not be bad at handling a snowmobile, but being not bad isn't enough to beat 2 people who have evidence to suggest that they would be able to succeed at driving a snowmobile. In the driving portion, any of the campers are allowed to drive. I think Rhea would drive since that's what she did in canon, and I think Carol would drive due to her aggression. For Hunter and Ali, I'm not sure who would drive. I can see both of them wanting to do it, which could bring up an argument considering that Ali canonically wasn't happy about Hunter taking full control. And this is one of the reasons why I think Ali and Hunter are the last duo to complete this section. We saw Rhea's aggression while driving in the canon season 2 finale, and she was in 2nd place. If Rhea was playing aggressively, imagine Carol's level of aggression. I would expect Carol to drive fast enough to maintain her lead, and even if Rhea catches up to her, I wouldn't be shocked if Carol tried ramming Rhea's car, just like she did in the canonical episode 9 with her sled. Therefore, I think Carol's aggression allows her and James to reach the cliffside first, followed by Rhea and Connor, with Ali and Hunter showing up in last place. Now for the climbing portion. In canon, Rhea and Connor managed to maintain their position in the standings through this portion, so it's not unreasonable to believe that the same would occur in this timeline. For Carol and James, it's possible that James might struggle with pulling Carol up the mountain. However, in canon, Connor struggled with pulling Rhea up the mountain, so we have to take that into account as well. So even if James struggles to pull Carol up the mountain, this is balanced out by Connor struggling to pull Rhea up the mountain. Therefore, Carol should be able to stay ahead of Rhea going into the cliff section. As for Ali and Hunter, it's definitely possible for Hunter to pull Ali up the mountain very quickly, even if Ali's climbing skills are just on par with Rhea and Carol's climbing skills. So going into the cliff section of the challenge, let's say Carol and James are in first, while Rhea and Connor are tied with Ali and Hunter. For the cliff portion, it basically comes down to who can get dressed in their wingsuit and jump off the cliff first. Since Carol gets to the cliff first, and because there's no reason to suspect that she's afraid of heights, I feel like Carol would jump off the cliff and reach the docks first, earning her the first spot in the final two. This leaves Rhea and Ali competing for the last spot in the final two. Since we established that they reach the cliff section at the same time, it comes down to whoever gets dressed and jumps off the cliff first. And once again, thanks to episode 5 of Disventure Camp All-Stars, we know that Ali at least hesitates before jumping off a cliff. And honestly, considering Rhea's competitiveness and aggression towards winning, I think Rhea ends up taking advantage of Ali's hesitation and jumps off the cliff first, allowing her to reach the dock and take the last spot in the final two, eliminating Ali from the competition. Sorry Ali. You made it pretty far though. Third is nothing to be ashamed about. This leaves Carol and Rhea to start the boat driving section of the challenge. I don't think there's evidence to suggest that either of them are good or bad at driving boats, so I'm going to assume that they have the same skill level, and since Carol is in the lead, she will maintain her lead going into the diving portion of the challenge. And yes, I know that Rhea crashed her boat into the platform, but the point is that she can at least get to her platform. Now we're at the diving section. There's no evidence to suggest that Carol is uncomfortable with diving or bad at finding things, so we'll assume that her performance in this section is just average. But for Rhea, there are a couple instances in the canon finale that indicate that Rhea is uncomfortable with scuba diving. Yes, we can attribute some of this to the fact that she didn't have a helper in the canon timeline, but she seemed nervous even before she entered the cave. So, I think it's safe to assume that Rhea's performance will be hindered in this portion of the challenge. Even though I'm confident that Connor will be able to navigate Rhea out of the cave, this setback probably increases Carol's lead heading into the final part of the challenge. The final part of the challenge is a motorbike race around some obstacles while two other campers are shooting golf balls at them. Since both of the remaining finalists entered the challenge with only one supporter, any of the eliminated campers who aren't currently helping in the challenge are eligible to shoot the golf balls. Let's solve this by process of elimination. Maggy and Kai probably wouldn't want to shoot the finalists, so they're out of the picture. I don't think Ali or Tess would be strongly for or against either of them since Carol and Rhea tried to keep both of them safe through the second half of the merge. And for Hunter, he might be equally as upset with them since both of them voted him out in this timeline, so he's out. In the end, I feel like Yul would shoot on behalf of Carol, since Rhea was the one who sent him to the orange team, which resulted in his elimination, so he probably holds strong negative feelings towards Rhea for that move. As for who would shoot on behalf of Rhea, I think Aiden would step up. My justification for this is that canonically, Carol managed to trick Aiden into believing that she was on his side, so if Carol were to successfully blindside him, like she did in this timeline, Aiden would probably hold resentment for that. Therefore, we have Yul and Aiden shooting golf balls while Carol and Rhea attempt to ride motorbikes to the finish line. Canonically, Rhea was able to ride the motorbike pretty well, and Carol has shown that she's capable of balancing on a bike, considering that she was able to balance on her bike in episode 1. Yes, a bike is different from a motorbike, but it's a decent comparison. Anyways, by this point in the challenge, Carol has a significant lead on Rhea. The question is, would Aiden be able to slow down Carol to the point that Rhea could pass her? Now, we know that Aiden is accurate, considering that he was able to hit Nina despite only having lemons as ammunition. However, it's worth noting that it took quite a bit of time before Aiden could knock Nina off the ledge. And considering that the finalists are riding motorbikes, I don't know if Aiden has that kind of time. But what if Aiden hits the gun like he told Lake to do in canon? Would that knock Carol off the bike? Maybe. But that doesn't mean that Carol loses. Keep in mind that in canon, the gun knocked Rhea off her bike pretty close to the finish line. And recall that Carol entered this portion of the challenge with a considerable lead over Rhea. Probably more of a lead than what Rhea had over James in canon. So, if Carol is knocked off at the same point as Rhea was in canon, I just feel like Carol would have enough time to get up and run across the finish line before Rhea catches up to her. Therefore, I feel like regardless of whether or not Aiden can knock Carol off the bike, I feel like Carol is far enough ahead of Rhea that she still has enough time to get up, shake off the hit, and cross the finish line, winning herself the $1 million prize. So we have our answer. If Maggy wins rock paper scissors, Yul doesn't get poisoned, James gets eliminated pre-merge instead of winning the season, Maggy gets blindsided in the early merge, Hunter is eliminated much earlier, Rosa Maria gets to use her totem correctly, Rhea gets the exact same placement as in canon, and Carol goes on to win the $1 million prize. Honestly, depending on who you are, this might actually be a better ending to Season 2 compared to what actually happened. And that about does it for this video. What do you think of my theory? Do you agree with my thought process? Do you disagree? Did I miss something big that would impact the entire video? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. If you're ever in a game of rock paper scissors for a chance at winning $1 million, always pick rock. People will always pick scissors, and you will beat them. Trust me. Thank you, and farewell.